My parents called about my sister's $800,000 loan I never borrowed. They said, "It's your duty to pay her back." I smiled. I confronted them over dinner, and what they said shocked me. The truth hit hard. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my office. Mom's voice carried that familiar sweetness she reserved for asking favors, the kind that made my shoulders tense before she even finished her greeting. "Susan, honey, we need to talk about helping your sister." I set down my pen. What's going on with Madison now? Well, she took out a loan for her business venture, and things haven't quite worked out the way she planned. Your father and I think it would be wonderful if you could help her pay it back. Family takes care of family after all. The number she mentioned made me choke on my coffee. $800,000. Madison had borrowed nearly $1 million, and somehow this had become my problem. Mom, that's an insane amount of money. What kind of business loan was this? Oh, you know your sister. She had big dreams about opening that chain of boutique wellness centers. The investors pulled out, and now the bank is being difficult about the repayment terms. I rubbed my temples, feeling the beginnings of a headache. And you're calling me because you're doing so well, sweetheart. You've always been the responsible one, the one who made good choices. Madison needs you. We all need to support each other. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Mom deploying every guilt trip in her arsenal. I was the older sister. I had the stable career. I'd always been blessed with good fortune, unlike poor Madison, who struggled so much. Didn't I remember how Madison had shared her toys with me when we were little? Didn't I care about family? I ended the call with a non-committal, "I'll think about it," and sat staring at my computer screen, unable to focus on the spreadsheets in front of me. This wasn't the first time Madison's chaos had rippled into my life. Growing up, I'd watched my parents bail her out of every mess she created: failed classes, wrecked cars, credit card debt, a wedding to a man she'd known for 6 weeks that fell apart within a year. Each time, Mom and Dad had opened their wallets and assured her that everyone makes mistakes. Meanwhile, I'd worked 2 jobs through college to avoid burdening them with student loans. I'd chosen a practical major in finance instead of following my dream of studying art history. I'd saved, planned, and built a life that was secure but came at the cost of countless small sacrifices. Dad called that evening. His approach was more direct. "Your mother tells me you're hesitating about helping Madison. I'm disappointed, Susan. I raised you better than this." "Dad, it's $800,000. That's not a small favor. That's more than most people make in a decade. Madison is your sister. She made a mistake, yes, but she needs support right now, not judgment. You have a 6-figure salary and a healthy investment portfolio. You can afford to do this." The presumption in his voice ignited something hot in my chest. "How do you know about my investment portfolio?" A pause. "Madison mentioned you talked about it." I hadn't talked to Madison about my finances in years. She must have been snooping, or worse, Mom and Dad had been discussing my private information with her. I'm not saying no. I lied, buying time. I just need to understand the full situation. Can we all sit down and talk about this? "Sunday dinner at your place?" Dad agreed, sounding relieved. I hung up and immediately called my friend Rachel, an attorney who specialized in financial law. "They're setting you up," Rachel said bluntly after I explained the situation. "Don't commit to anything until you know exactly what kind of loan this is, who holds it, and what your sister actually spent the money on. 800 grand doesn't disappear into a failed business without a trace." I spent the next 4 days doing research. Madison's wellness center idea had resulted in exactly one location that operated for 8 months before closing. The math didn't add up. Even with rent inventory and employee salaries, there was no way she'd burn through that much money on a single small business. During those 4 days, memories kept surfacing, unwanted ones. I'd be reviewing a spreadsheet of Madison's business expenses when suddenly I'd remember being 12 years old watching Dad hand Madison $300 for a school trip to Washington, D.C. She'd lost the permission slip twice and turned in her project late, but he smiled and said she deserved to go anyway. When I'd asked for money to attend a summer art program that same year, he told me the family budget was tight and maybe I could save my babysitting money. The pattern had been there all along. I just hadn't wanted to see it clearly. Wednesday afternoon, I met with Rachel at a coffee shop near her office. She pulled some public records for me, things I didn't have the legal access to request myself. "Your sister's business filed for bankruptcy last month," Rachel said, sliding a folder across the table. "Chapter 7, full liquidation. There are at least 6 other creditors, besides the bank suppliers, contractors, the landlord for the Hartford location. She owes money everywhere." I flipped through the documents, my stomach sinking with each page. How did she get credit with this many people? "Your parents co-signed for more than just the bank loan. They guaranteed the lease. They backed her line of credit with the suppliers. Susan, they're on the hook for about $1.2 million total when you add everything up. The bank loan is $800,000, but there's another $250,000 in the lease obligation, about $100,000 owed to suppliers, and roughly $50,000 in other business debts. Your parents guaranteed most of it. The coffee I'd been drinking turned to acid in my stomach. Oh my God. There's more, Rachel said, pulling out another sheet. Madison filed for personal bankruptcy 2 years ago. She's already used that protection once. If she tries again so soon, the courts might not grant it, which means she's looking at wage garnishment for the rest of her working life. Why didn't my parents tell me how bad this was? Rachel gave me a look that was equal parts sympathy and exasperation. Because they knew what you'd say. They knew you'd tell them this was insane. So they hid it and hoped Madison's magical thinking would somehow pay off. I pushed the documents away, unable to look at them anymore. What do I do legally? Nothing. You're not liable for any of this. Morally, that's above my pay grade. Rachel stirred her coffee. But as your friend, I'll say this. You've spent your whole life being the emergency fund. Maybe it's time you let them experience actual consequences. That evening, I went for a run through my neighborhood trying to clear my head. The autumn air was crisp leaves crunching under my feet. My mind wouldn't stop churning. I thought about the year Madison dropped out of college halfway through her junior year. She'd called it finding herself. Mom and Dad had supported her decision, even paid for her to backpack through Europe for 6 months. When she came home, she'd bounce between jobs, never lasting more than a few months anywhere. She'd been a yoga instructor, a life coach, a social media consultant, a personal shopper. Nothing stuck because nothing required her to stick with it. There was always another opportunity, another dream, another chance. Meanwhile, I'd graduated summa cum laude, gotten my CPA certification, and climbed the corporate ladder, with the kind of focus that came from knowing no one would catch me if I fell. By Friday, I'd compiled a complete financial picture of the disaster. The numbers were worse than I'd imagined. Even if my parents refinanced their house and Madison sold everything she owned, they'd still be looking at decades of debt, the kind that would consume their retirement and possibly force them to work into their 70s. Part of me felt guilty for not immediately offering to help. That was the part that had been trained since childhood to fix things, to smooth over problems, to be the solution. But there was another part growing stronger that was furious at being put in this position at all. I called my Aunt Jessica that night, Mom's older sister. We'd always been close, and she was one of the few family members who'd never bought into the Madison worship. I was wondering when you'd call, Aunt Jessica said. Your mother mentioned they were going to ask you for help. Did she mention the amount? No, but I can guess it's substantial. Madison's always been expensive. There was a dry humor in her voice. Your mother called me last month fishing for a loan. I told her I'd already bailed Madison out twice, and I was done. She hung up on me. This was news to me. Madison borrowed money from you. $30,000 in 2019, another $20,000 last year. I never saw a penny back. When I asked about repayment, Madison told me that family doesn't keep score. Aunt Jessica snorted. Family also doesn't treat relatives like ATMs, but apparently I'm the villain for pointing that out. We talked for over an hour. Aunt Jessica told me stories I'd never heard about how Mom had been the same way growing up, always in some crisis that her parents had to resolve. How Grandma had confided before she died that her biggest regret was never letting Mom face real consequences. You're not responsible for fixing this, Aunt Jessica said firmly. I know that's hard to hear when you've been trained since birth to be the fixer. But Susan, honey, you need to let this play out. It's the only way any of them will learn. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment feeling more alone than I had in years. The weight of the decision was crushing. Say no, and my parents might lose their home. Say yes, and I'd be enabling the same destructive pattern that had defined my entire family for generations. I barely slept that night. By morning, I'd made my decision. I would go to the Sunday dinner. I would confront them with the evidence, and I would say no. Sunday arrived with the kind of gray autumn weather that matched my mood. I pulled up to my parents' house in suburban Connecticut, the same colonial where I'd grown up, where Madison had gotten her own car at 16 while I'd shared Mom's minivan. Madison's BMW was already in the driveway. Of course it was. The loan might be crushing her, but apparently not enough to downgrade her vehicle. Mom answered the door with her pageant smile, the one that had won her the title of Mrs. Fairfield County back in 1992. Sweetheart, come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready. The house smelled like pot roast, Mom's specialty weapon for family negotiations. She'd always believed that the right meal could smooth over any conflict. Madison was in the living room, scrolling through her phone. She looked up when I entered, and I caught something in her expression. Not guilt, but calculation. She was strategizing. "Hey, Sue, thanks for coming." "Wouldn't miss it," I said lightly. Dad emerged from his study newspaper tucked under his arm. He'd retired last year from his job as a regional sales manager and had apparently decided to spend his golden years micromanaging his daughter's relationships. We settled around the dining room table with its lace runner and good china, the same setup we'd used for every important family discussion. I waited until everyone had filled their plates before I spoke. "So let's talk about this loan." Madison walked me through what happened. She set down her fork, composing her face into an expression of humble regret that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I had this vision, a place where people could come for yoga meditation, organic smoothies, wellness coaching, a real community space. I found the perfect location in downtown Hartford, signed a 5-year lease, and got a business loan to cover the startup costs. $800,000 seems high for one location. While there were renovations, the space needed completely gutted and rebuilt. And I wanted top-of-the-line equipment, the best instructors. I didn't want to cut corners." "Where did you get a loan that size? Banks don't usually lend that much for a first-time business owner with no track record." Madison's jaw tightened. "I had a cosigner." The room went very quiet. I looked at my parents. "Please tell me you didn't." Mom reached for her water glass. "We wanted to support your sister's dreams. She was so passionate about this project." "You co-signed an $800,000 loan," I said slowly, "which means when Madison defaults, they're coming after you." Dad's face had gone red. "Nobody's defaulting on anything. We're going to work this out as a family." Understanding crashed over me like cold water. This wasn't about Madison needing help. This was about my parents facing financial ruin because they'd made an idiotic decision and now expected me to save them. "How much do you have in savings, Dad?" "That's not—" "How much?" "About $60,000 after the first few payments we made on Madison's behalf. We've been using my retirement distributions." I turned to Madison. "And where exactly did all that money go? Because one wellness center doesn't cost $800,000. She lifted her chin defensively. "I already explained." "No, you gave me a vague answer about renovations and equipment. I want specifics, receipts, contracts, bank statements showing where every dollar went." "Why are you being so hostile? I'm your sister, not a criminal under investigation." "You're asking me for the equivalent of a mortgage payment, except I don't get a house at the end. So yes, I want documentation." Mom's voice went sharp. "Susan Marie, this is family. We don't interrogate each other like suspects. We trust and support one another." "Trust." I laughed, and it came out bitter. "You've been discussing my private finances with Madison, pressuring me to hand over money for a situation you created by co-signing a loan you couldn't afford. Where's the trust in that?" Madison stood abruptly. "I don't have to sit here and be attacked. I made a mistake, okay? The business failed. I'm sorry. I'm trying to fix it and I need help. Is that so terrible?" "Sit down," I said quietly. Something in my tone made her sink back into her chair. I pulled a folder from my bag and laid it on the table. "I spent this week doing research. I hired a private investigator to look into your business expenses. Want to know what I found?" The color drained from Madison's face. "You did what?" "You spent $80,000 on renovations, which is steep but reasonable for commercial space. Another $40,000 on equipment and initial inventory. $20,000 on marketing and business licensing. That's $140,000. Where's the other $660,000, Madison?" The silence was deafening. Dad had gone very still, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. I flipped open the folder. $200,000 went into a separate account in your name. $150,000 paid off your personal credit card debt and your ex-husband's settlement from the divorce. $75,000 purchased that BMW in the driveway. Another $100,000 went to something labeled investments, which I'm guessing was either cryptocurrency or day trading, both of which you lost money on. Should I continue?" "You had no right," Madison started. "You used a business loan for personal expenses," I interrupted. "That's fraud. The bank could prosecute you. Mom and Dad could lose their house." Mom had started crying, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin. Dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in the span of a minute. The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear the antique clock on the mantel ticking, each second stretching into eternity. Madison's face had gone from defiant to panicked, her eyes darting between our parents as if looking for someone to save her. "You don't understand," Madison finally said, her voice cracking. "I was trying to build something real, something that mattered. You've always had your career handed to you. Handed to me. I felt something snap inside. I worked 60-hour weeks as a junior analyst while you were taking beach vacations. I studied for the CPA exam while working full-time. I lived in a studio apartment with a radiator that barely worked because I was saving every penny. Nothing was handed to me, Madison. I earned it. You were always the smart one. She shot back, her eyes blazing. The one everyone praised. Do you know what it's like living in your shadow? Do you know what it's like watching your sister get bailed out over and over while you're told to be more responsible, to sacrifice and save while she spends and gets rewarded for it? Dad slammed his hand on the table, making the china rattle. That's enough, both of you. This isn't about the past. This is about family coming together in a crisis. No, Dad, this is exactly about the past. I turned to face him fully. This is about 30 years of you and Mom teaching Madison that consequences don't apply to her, that someone will always swoop in to fix her mistakes. You created this situation by co-signing loans you couldn't afford for a daughter who's never succeeded at any business venture she's tried. She's our daughter, Mom said through her tears. We wanted to support her dreams. What about my dreams? The question came out sharper than I intended. Did you know I wanted to study art history in college? That I had been accepted to a program at Colia? The blank look on their faces was answer enough. Of course they didn't. Because when I mentioned it, Dad told me art history was a useless degree that would leave me waiting tables. He said I needed to be practical, get a real education, so I chose finance. I gave up what I loved because you told me to be responsible. That was different, Dad said weakly. We were looking out for your future. No, you were making sure at least one of your daughters would be financially stable enough to bail out the other one. And it worked, didn't it? Here we are. Madison stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I don't need to listen to this. You're acting like I'm some terrible person when I just had bad luck. The wellness industry is competitive. Timing matters. If I'd opened 6 months earlier, you'd have found another excuse, I said flatly. Madison, you've been failing upward your entire life because people keep giving you second chances you haven't earned. Your marriage failed because you cheated. Your last 3 jobs ended because you stopped showing up. This business failed because you embezzled from your own company to fund your lifestyle. I didn't embezzle. It was my business. Funded with a loan meant for specific purposes, I shot back. Rachel explained the legal definition to me very clearly. What you did was fraudulent conversion of loan proceeds. You could face criminal charges. The color drained from Madison's face again. She looked at Dad. She's lying. Tell her she's lying. But Dad was staring at the folder I'd laid on the table, the bank statements and canceled checks. His hands were trembling slightly. Where did you get this information? He asked quietly. I hired a forensic accountant and a private investigator. It took them 3 days to track everything down. The bank will find it too, Dad. They're probably already looking. When they do, they'll come after Madison for fraud and you two for the full loan amount as co-signers. Mom's crying had intensified. We'll lose the house. Everything we've worked for. You should have thought about that before putting up your home as collateral for Madison's pipe dream. I softened my voice slightly. Mom, I'm not trying to be cruel, but you made a choice. You chose to enable Madison instead of letting her face reality. Actions have consequences. So you're just going to abandon us? Madison's voice had gone shrill. Let us lose everything while you sit in your fancy apartment with your fancy jobs. My apartment isn't fancy. It's a 1-bedroom in a decent neighborhood that I can afford because I live within my means. My job isn't fancy either. It's demanding and stressful, and I earn my position through years of hard work. And yes, I'm going to let you face the consequences of your decisions because that's the only way you'll ever grow up. Susan, Dad's voice carried a warning tone I remembered from childhood. You're being cruel. I'm being honest. There's a difference. I gathered the papers back into the folder. Here's what I know, Dad. You and Mom have about $60,000 left in savings. The house is worth roughly $450,000. And you owe $200,000 on the mortgage. That leaves you with $250,000 in equity. If you refinance and pull out $200,000, you'll have enough to make a dent in Madison's debt while keeping some emergency funds. I pulled out another document. I've already talked to a financial advisor. He's willing to meet with you next week to discuss restructuring options. Madison will need to file a debt management plan, get a real job with steady income, and sell any assets that aren't essential. The BMW, any jewelry designer handbags, whatever she can liquidate. You've got this all figured out, Madison said bitterly, controlling everyone's life playing the martyr. I'm giving you a roadmap to survival. Whether you follow it is up to you. I stood pushing my chair in. But I'm not writing a check? I'm not taking out loans. I'm not draining my retirement accounts. You made this mess, and you're going to clean it up. What if we can't? Mom's voice was small, defeated. What if it's too much? Then you'll file bankruptcy, lose the house, and start over. It will be hard and humbling and painful, but you'll survive it. People do it every day. Dad's face had gone from red to gray. He looked older than his 67 years, deflated somehow. I never thought you'd turn your back on family like this. I'm not turning my back. I'm refusing to throw myself on the fire to keep you warm. There's a difference. I picked up my bag. I'll email you the financial advisor's contact information. He's good at what he does and he doesn't judge. You'll need that. Susan, please. Mom reached for my hand across the table. Just think about it. Sleep on it. We're your parents. We raised you, loved you, gave you everything. Gave you. You gave Madison everything, I corrected, gently pulling my hand away. You gave me expectations and criticism and the message that my worth was tied to my usefulness. That's not love, Mom. That's conditioning. I walked toward the door, each step feeling heavier than the last. Behind me, I could hear Madison crying now, loud, dramatic sobs that sounded more angry than sad. Mom was pleading with Dad to say something to fix this. Dad was silent, stunned, perhaps, by the realization that his reliable daughter had finally drawn a line. At the doorway, I paused and turned back. They looked like strangers, suddenly these people I'd tried so hard to please my entire life. I love you, I said, and meant it despite everything. But I love myself more now. And that means protecting my peace, my future, and my sanity, even if you can't understand it. I was going to pay it back, Madison whispered suddenly. The investments were supposed to grow. I was going to double or triple the money and pay off the loan early. It was going to work. Except it didn't, and now you're in a hole you can't climb out of. I closed the folder. Here's what's going to happen. I'm not giving you a dime. Susan, Dad began. I'm not finished. Madison, you're going to sell that BMW and get something reasonable. That'll give you about $40,000 to put toward the debt. You're going to get a real job, not another business scheme, and you're going to make payments like a responsible adult. Mom, Dad, you're going to refinance your house to pull out equity, which will hurt, but won't destroy you if you're careful. We can't afford, Mom protested. You should have thought about that before co-signing. I'll help you work out a budget and a payment plan with the bank. I'll even give you the name of a financial advisor who can help you restructure everything, but I'm not writing a check to fix a mess that you all created through irresponsibility and lies. Madison's face had gone from pale to flushed. You're really going to let us lose everything? Your own family. You're really going to sit there and pretend you didn't commit fraud? Your own family, I shot back. I love you, Madison, but I'm done enabling you. Every time you mess up, someone swoops in to save you, and you never learn. You're 41 years old. It's time to grow up. I stood gathering my things. The pot roast sat congealing on my plate, untouched. Susan, please, Mom said, her voice breaking. We need you. You need me to be your bank. There's a difference. I looked at each of them in turn. I'll help you navigate this financially, but I'm not paying your debt. Call me when you're ready to have a real conversation about solutions instead of bailouts. I walked out of that house with my head high and my hands shaking. By the time I reached my car, tears were streaming down my face. Not because I regretted my decision, but because I finally understood that my parents had never seen me as their daughter. I was their insurance policy, their backup plan, the responsible one who could be relied upon to fix whatever Madison broke. My phone rang before I even made it out of the driveway. Madison's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call, then another call from Mom. Declined. Dad. Declined. I drove home in a fog, my mind replaying the dinner over and over, the look on their faces when I'd laid out the evidence the way Madison had tried to flip the script and make herself the victim. The disappointment in Dad's eyes when he realized I wasn't going to fold. When I got back to my apartment, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony staring out at the city lights. My phone kept buzzing with texts. Mom, please, sweetheart, we need to talk about this properly. You're not thinking clearly, Madison. I hope you can live with yourself knowing you destroyed your own family. Dad, very disappointed in the person you've become, Susan. This isn't how we raised you. Each message felt like a small knife, but I didn't respond. Rachel had warned me this would happen. The extinction burst, she'd called it, when you stop enabling the person being enabled, ramps up their manipulation tactics because the old methods aren't working anymore. Around 10 that night, my doorbell rang. I checked the peephole and saw Madison standing there, mascara streaked down her face. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. 5 minutes, I said. That's all you get. She pushed past me into the apartment, pacing like a caged animal. You really screwed me. You know that Mom and Dad are devastated. Dad had chest pains after you left. Mom had to give him his blood pressure medication. That's not on me. That's on the situation you created. I didn't create anything alone. They chose to co-sign. They wanted to help you, and you took advantage of that. You always have. I crossed my arms. Madison, do you even feel bad about the fraud? About lying to the bank? About putting Mom and Dad's retirement at risk? She stopped pacing. For a moment, something flickered across her face, shame maybe, or fear, but then her jaw set in that familiar, stubborn line. I feel bad that my own sister hired a PI to dig up dirt on me. What kind of person does that? The kind who's been lied to one too many times. The kind who's tired of being the family ATM. I gestured toward the door. Your 5 minutes are up. Leave, Madison. I'm not leaving until you agree to help. I'll stay here all night if I have to. Then I'll call the police and have you removed for trespassing. She laughed, but it was edged with hysteria. You'd really do that? Have your own sister arrested? Try me. We stared at each other, and I saw the moment she realized I wasn't bluffing. The calculation in her eyes shifted. She was trying to figure out a new angle, a different manipulation. What if I paid you back? She said suddenly. What if I signed a contract, made it official? You loan me the money, and I pay you back with interest over 10 years. With what money, Madison? You don't have a job. Your credit is destroyed. You've already filed bankruptcy once. Even if I wanted to help you, which I don't, that's not a realistic plan. I could get a job, a good one. I have skills. You have a resume full of 3-month stints and failed ventures. Most employers won't touch you. I softened my voice slightly. Madison, you need to face reality. The wellness center failed. The investments failed. Your schemes and shortcuts always fail because they're built on nothing. You need to start from the bottom and work your way up like everyone else. Like you mean the perfect daughter who never makes mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes. I just didn't expect other people to pay for them. She moved toward the door, then turned back. Her face had shifted again, and now she just looked tired. Do you know why I really took that money? The personal stuff, not the business expenses. I assume because you wanted things you couldn't afford. Because I thought if I looked successful enough, felt successful enough, maybe I'd actually become successful. Like if I drove the right car and wore the right clothes and lived in the right apartment, the rest would follow. She laughed bitterly. Fake it till you make it right, except I just kept faking and never made anything. It was perhaps the most honest thing she'd said in years. I felt a flicker of sympathy quickly suppressed. That's something to talk about in therapy, I said, but it doesn't change the situation you're in now. She left without another word, and I locked the door behind her, leaning against it as I heard her footsteps retreat down the hallway. The apartment felt very quiet suddenly, very empty. Over the next few days, the family pressure campaign intensified. Aunt Carol called to tell me I was breaking my mother's heart. Uncle Tom sent a long email about the importance of family loyalty. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly weighing in on social media about people who abandon their loved ones in times of need. The worst was when my grandmother called. She was 92, sharp as ever despite her age, and she didn't mince words. Your mother tells me you're refusing to help with Madison's situation. That's right, Grandma. Good for you. I almost dropped the phone. What? I said good for you. It's about time someone in this family stopped treating that girl like a perpetual child. Grandma's voice was crisp with approval. I told your mother 30 years ago she was making a mistake, always swooping in to fix things, but she wouldn't listen. Neither would your father. Now look where it's gotten them. Mom said you were disappointed in me. Your mother lies when it suits her purpose, always has. I love her, but I'm not blind to her faults. There was a pause. Susan, honey, you're doing the right thing. It's hard and it hurts, but it's right. Don't let them guilt you into destroying yourself to save them from their own choices. After I hung up, I cried harder than I had since the dinner. Having Grandma's support felt like permission to trust my own judgment, to believe that I wasn't the villain in this story. Work became my refuge. I threw myself into a major acquisition analysis, staying late at the office, volunteering for extra projects. My boss commented on my renewed focus, pleased but slightly concerned. Everything okay at home? She asked one afternoon. Family stuff, I said vaguely. Nothing I can't handle. But the truth was, I wasn't sure if I could handle it. The constant barrage of messages, the guilt that gnawed at me in quiet moments, the fear that maybe I really was selfish and cold. Like they said, it was exhausting in a way that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with emotional warfare. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Rachel checked in over lunch. "How are you holding up?" she asked, pushing aside her iced tea. "Some days better than others. They're still calling constantly. The family group chat is a nightmare." "Have you considered blocking them at least temporarily?" "That feels so final." "It's not about being final. It's about protecting your peace while they process." Rachel pushed her salad around her plate. "Susan, you're being emotionally battered right now. That's what this is, abuse. They're trying to break you down until you give in." "They're my family. That doesn't give them the right to treat you this way." I knew she was right. That night, I muted the family group chat and set my parents' and Madison's numbers to go straight to voicemail. The silence that followed was both relief and loneliness. A week later, 3 weeks after that disastrous Sunday dinner, Madison showed up at my apartment. I almost didn't let her in, but something about her appearance stopped me. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail instead of her usual carefully styled waves. She looked exhausted. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. "Please, I'm not here to yell." Against my better judgment, I opened the door wider. She sat on my couch, perched on the edge, like she might bolt at any moment. "The BMW is sold," she said without preamble. "I got $38,000 for it. I bought a used Honda Civic, and I got a job administrative assistant at a law firm. It's not glamorous, but it's steady." I sat in the chair across from her, maintaining distance. "That's good. Mom and Dad are refinancing the house. The advisor you recommended walked them through everything. It's going to be tight, but they won't lose the house if they stick to the budget." "I'm glad to hear it." Madison's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so angry at you." "I know, but I also know you were right about all of it." She wiped her face roughly. "I didn't just fail at the business, Sue. I sabotaged it. I took that money and told myself I deserved it because you always got the praise, the approval, the pride. I was so jealous of you that I destroyed my own chance at success just to prove I don't even know what." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to comfort her to fall back into the old pattern of smoothing things over. But I'd learned to recognize that impulse for what it was, codependency disguised as love. "Madison, I can't fix this for you. You have to do the work yourself." "I know. I'm starting therapy. Court-ordered, actually. When the bank found out about the fraud, they could have prosecuted, but Dad negotiated a settlement that includes repayment plus community service and mandatory counseling. Court-ordered therapy is still therapy." She laughed, a sound with no humor in it. "Yeah, the therapist already told me I have a lot to unpack about birth order and parental favoritism." She met my eyes. "Do you think you got favoritism?" I considered the question carefully. "I think I got approval when I achieved things. You got attention when you struggled. Neither of us got what we actually needed, which was for Mom and Dad to love us without conditions or comparisons." Madison nodded slowly. "I spent so much time resenting you. I never stopped to think that you might have been suffering too." "I'm not asking for your sympathy," I said gently, "but I am asking you to stop expecting me to sacrifice myself to make your life easier. I can't keep doing that." "I understand." She stood, smoothing her jeans. "I should go. I just wanted you to know that I'm taking responsibility finally, and I'm sorry for all of it." After she left, I sat in my apartment as the evening faded into night, processing the conversation. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. Acknowledgement, maybe. A crack in the wall we'd built between us. Mom called a week later. "Your father and I have been talking," she said, her voice subdued. "We owe you an apology, a real one, not just words. We put too much pressure on you over the years, and we enabled Madison's irresponsibility. That wasn't fair to either of you." "No, it wasn't. We'd like to try to rebuild our relationship with you on your terms. No expectations, no guilt trips, just a chance to do better." I thought about the little girl I'd been always striving for approval that was given freely to my sister. I thought about the woman I'd become successful, but lonely, exhausted from holding boundaries against people who should have respected them from the start. "I'd like that," I said carefully, "but it needs to be real change, Mom. Not just words that disappear the next time Madison has a crisis." "Understood. Will you come to dinner next month? No pressure, no agenda, just family." I hesitated, then surprised myself. "Yes, but I'm bringing someone." "A boyfriend." Mom's voice brightened with hope. "A friend who's also a therapist. She specializes in family dynamics, and I think we could all benefit from having her there to help us communicate better." There was a long pause. Then, to my shock, Mom agreed. That dinner a month later was awkward and difficult. We sat around the same table, but everything felt different. Rachel, my friend, the attorney, sat next to me as support. Dr. Linda Chen, the family therapist I'd hired, facilitated conversations that were painful but necessary. Madison talked about her jealousy. Dad admitted he'd always been harder on me because he thought I could handle it. Mom cried and confessed she'd never known how to relate to me because I was so self-sufficient, so unlike her. I talked about feeling invisible unless I was solving someone else's problem, about building a successful career, but feeling empty because I'd never pursued what I actually wanted, about how hard it was to trust people's love when it always seemed to come with conditions. It wasn't a miracle cure. One dinner couldn't undo decades of dysfunction, but it was a beginning, and sometimes that's enough. 6 months later, Madison made her first loan payment on time without asking anyone for help. 3 months after that, she got promoted at the law firm. She started dating someone who actually had their life together, and she seemed genuinely happy rather than frantically manic. Mom and Dad stuck to their budget and even started putting small amounts back into savings. Dad took up woodworking, channeling his need to fix things into furniture instead of his daughters' lives. Mom joined a book club and started talking about things beyond her children's problems. As for me, I did something I'd never allowed myself to do before I took a leave of absence from work and enrolled in a continuing education program for art history at Yale. I didn't quit my job. I'm still too practical for that, but I finally gave myself permission to pursue something purely because it brought me joy. The family group chat still exists, but now it's mostly photos of Dad's woodworking projects and Mom's book recommendations. Madison sends memes. Sometimes I share pictures from museum exhibitions. We're not perfect. Madison still has moments where she slips into old patterns, and I still have to reinforce boundaries. Mom sometimes forgets and tries to guilt trip me into things, and Dad occasionally lectures me about responsibility. But we're all trying, genuinely trying, and that matters. The loan will take years to pay off. Madison's credit is ruined. My parents had to downsize their retirement dreams. These are real consequences that can't be erased. But here's what I learned: sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to save them. Sometimes love means standing firm while someone you care about faces the natural results of their choices. Sometimes family means being honest, even when honesty causes pain. I'll never get back. The years I spent being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who sacrificed her dreams so others could chase theirs recklessly. But I'm done living that way. I'm done being the backup plan, the insurance policy, the solution to problems I didn't create. I'm just Susan now, not the perfect daughter, not the responsible sister, just a woman learning to live for herself while maintaining relationships with people who are also learning and growing. And you know what? That smile I wore when I left that disastrous Sunday dinner, the one that came from finally standing up for myself, I wear it more often now because I finally understand that protecting my peace isn't selfish. It's survival. The loan isn't my responsibility. Madison's choices weren't my fault. My parents' financial crisis wasn't mine to solve. And the burden I carried for 43 years, the weight of being everyone's safety net, wasn't mine to bear. I set it down that day. And despite the guilt, despite the anger, despite the tears and the hard conversations and the fractured family dynamics that are slowly, painfully healing, I've never regretted it. Some debts aren't meant to be paid. Some lessons can only be learned through hardship, and sometimes the only way to save your family is to stop trying to save them. Let them learn to save themselves. That's the truth that hit me hard over that dinner. In the months that followed, I noticed subtle shifts everywhere. Conversations that used to drain me now had pauses, space where silence could exist without panic. My mother, once constantly calling to update me on Madison's crises, began asking about my life instead. "How's your art class going?" she'd ask one afternoon. It startled me more than I wanted to admit. "It's good," I said. "I'm studying early Renaissance pieces this term." "I remember you mentioning that in high school," she said softly. "I wish we'd let you pursue it back then." I smiled, not bitterly this time. "Me too. But I'm doing it now. That's what matters." She nodded. For the first time, I saw understanding instead of guilt in her eyes. Dad, who had once lectured me on financial prudence, sent me photos of his latest woodworking projects: a coffee table, a bookshelf, a jewelry box for Mom. "Building something steady feels good," he said during one of our calls. "Reminds me that not everything has to be about fixing what's broken." That line stayed with me. Madison and I weren't best friends, but we were something new, something more honest. She called once a week not to ask for money or advice, but just to talk, really talk. "I'm working late," she'd tell me. "It's weird having people rely on me for once. Feels good, though." "I'm proud of you," I told her once, and she got quiet. "No one's ever said that to me before," she admitted. That moment, small as it was, cracked something open between us. Months passed and seasons shifted. By spring, the tension that had once defined every family interaction had softened into something almost gentle. One Sunday, we all met at a park for a picnic. No pot roast negotiations, no financial spreadsheets, just sunlight, sandwiches, and laughter that didn't feel forced. Madison brought a homemade salad, Dad carved wood with a pocket knife, and Mom read aloud from a mystery novel she'd been loving. At one point, Madison looked over at me and smiled a real smile, unguarded. "You know, if you hadn't said no, I'd probably still be lost," she said. "You figured things out on your own," I replied. "Because you stopped catching me," she said. "That's the difference." I nodded. There was truth in that, and peace too. That night, after I returned home, I stood on my balcony again, wine in hand, just like the night after the dinner. But everything felt different. The city lights looked softer. The silence didn't feel lonely anymore. For so long, I'd defined love as sacrifice, as giving, until there was nothing left. But love without boundaries isn't love. It's obligation disguised as virtue. Now I know better. I've learned that saying no isn't cruelty. It's clarity. That I can still love my family while refusing to destroy myself for them. That sometimes the person you need to rescue most is yourself. Rachel once told me that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks you decide who gets to come in and when. For years, my door had been wide open, letting in storms I mistook for connection. Now I still open it, but only to those who knock with respect. When I submitted my final paper for my art history program that summer, I included a personal reflection section. The prompt had asked, "What does art mean to you now?" I wrote, "Art is about perspective, seeing what's always been there, but differently. My life has been like that too. I spent years standing too close to the canvas trying to fix every flaw. Now I've stepped back and I finally see the whole picture." My professor called it poetic. I called it freedom. A few weeks later, Madison came by my apartment again. She handed me a small package, no bow, no card. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a framed photo, the two of us ages 5 and 7, grinning with chocolate ice cream smeared across our faces. Underneath, she'd written in careful handwriting, "Thank you for teaching me how to stand." I didn't say anything for a long time. I just hugged her, really hugged her, and for once it didn't feel like I was holding her up. We were standing side by side. Months turned into a year. The loan payments continued steadily. The family dinners became lighter, even warm. Sometimes we talked about old memories without bitterness, just nostalgia. And every now and then, Mom would say, "I'm proud of you, both of you," and mean it. It's strange how peace can feel foreign after years of chaos. Sometimes I'd catch myself waiting for the next crisis, the next phone call demanding rescue. But then I'd remember I didn't owe anyone a rescue anymore. That realization never stopped feeling liberating. So yes, I lost something that night over pot roast and guilt. But I gained something far more valuable. I gained myself. And when I think back to the moment my mother said, "It's your duty to pay her back," I realize how wrong she was and how grateful I am for it. Because in refusing that duty, I finally chose the one duty that actually mattered. The duty to my own peace, to my own life, to my own freedom. And that's a debt I will never regret paying.